We're made in the image of the Trinity, this perfect community, this perfect communion of the Father pouring himself out for love of the Son offering himself up for the love of the Father, and then the Holy Spirit communicating that throughout all of creation. We have this perfect communion, and we're made in that image, and what that tells us is that if we're made in the image of a community, then we ourselves are communal beings, we're social beings. We're not individuals in the sense that we are autonomous, completely separate from everybody else, and our only interaction with one another is by choice. We are intrinsically good, though fallen and broken and sinful, but we're also intrinsically social. We're intrinsically created. We are the very core of what it means to be human is to be in a community with other people, to be social with one another, to interact with one another, to rely on one another, and to serve one another. That really becomes the foundation of Catholic social teaching. And people are poor for many reasons. But that doesn't mean that we can simply ignore them. Even if, although it's very rare that people are poor because of their own choices, even if that is the case, they are still made in the likeness and image of God. And we are called to work with them, to enter into communion with them, and to serve their dignity, to treat them as Christ, and to see Christ in them. That is perhaps one of the most difficult aspects of Catholic social teaching. When we're affected so much by our brokenness and our fallenness and our sinfulness that it makes it difficult for us to recognize Christ, even in the people that have committed horrible atrocities. We go down the line and we see all these different elements of our world that are troubled, are challenging us. And it's amazing that out of any other faith tradition that exists, the Catholic faith has a very clear stance on every single one of them. All you have to do is pick up your catechism or pick up your compendium on the social doctrine of the Church, look at the index and look for any particular topic on the human person. And the Church will clearly define exactly what we believe and why we believe it. And that's very unlike most other faith traditions. And I would almost venture to say there are very few, if not any other faith traditions, except for our Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters, that have such clearly defined teachings on every single aspect of human life, of the human person, of human interaction. Whether it's abortion or the death penalty or immigration or feeding the poor, it's every single aspect of human interaction is right there in the catechism and the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church.
I'm Stacia McDermott, and I work at Loras College in the Father A. Herman Peace and Justice Center as the Peace and Justice Coordinator. And I remember just feeling totally awed and inspired that our church had all of these beautiful documents that talked about how we are called to respond to the social issues of the day. And very articulate, moving ways that are very clear. They don't leave a lot of gray of how we are called to meet the poor, to meet the marginalized, to meet the worker, and it was just a really transformational time for me. I was a social work major and always knew that I wanted to help other people from a very young age. I just always felt that desire. But until I started reading the writings of the Catholic Worker, where it removed the separation of I'm here to help you, instead of realizing that we are in this struggle together, that if you do better, I do better. And so it was just a really profound experience. Well, I think there's so many, if you break down the Catholic social teachings, if you break it down to the most primary one, which is the life and the dignity of the human person. I mean, when you have children, you know that is your priority. How are you forming these young people? And how are you continuing your relationship with your spouse, with your partner, to make that the central focus? So I think, yes, has my way of life changed? Is it become harder to live out, some of these social doctrines, to live, extremely simply? Absolutely. It totally is. Which is why I think it's so important to surround yourself with people who believe a lot of the same things you do. To not get too sucked into what society says is the way to live. That's the great dichotomy is like, it sounds so easy. Love your neighbor as yourself. Easy. That's such a simple thing, but it's so different. And you can do it when it's someone you're not connected with, but suddenly it takes a whole new meaning if, you're downtown and you're dealing with someone who's ungrateful and who is belligerent or who smells or who is irrational. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that doesn't apply to you. Or if it's your boss or, whoever it is. It's that constant challenge. Those documents, those doctrines, all of those things help us to refocus, help us to remember, okay, how are we called to live the gospel in the modern world? And it's countercultural. It's not normal. So much of it is forming these relationships and getting to know human beings. It goes back to the life and dignity of the human person, that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And how do we see that? That's different and unique in everyone. How are we connecting? We can talk about these teachings all we want, or we can talk about, people have the right to organize, workers have the right to organize, or they have the right to a fair wage, or that we're called, to help the poor. But until you meet the poor, until someone who's poor and is, on Title 19 and gets food stamps, until you understand and meet a person, then they're not just this group of people, all of these people on welfare. You see the human being behind it. We're all called to live out this gospel message, whether you're a banker, a lawyer, whether you work in an office, whether you're, we're called to live that out no matter what we do. We're called to recognize that each person is made in the image and likeness of God. And if you see that, if you see Christ in every person you meet, you are going to have a completely different interaction with them. It's difficult to maintain peace inside and in your home, and it's so important to continue to be grounded in faith, to be grounded in prayer, to be grounded in good relationships that help you.
Well, at Loras College, we place an emphasis on students learning Catholic social teaching because it is one of the defining characteristics of Catholicism. So it is very much included in what we do in the field of ethics, although it is not all we do, but it's a very important component of it. In general, the dignity of the human person is seen as the foundation of all other aspects of Catholic social teaching. Well, I have been teaching Catholic social teaching for the Diaconate Formation Program for a number of years. And I think that's a very important part of ministry preparation. In terms of my work here at Loras College, I chair the Committee for Ethics and Values Education, and according to the college's strategic plan, our committee's particular job is to promote Catholic social teaching here on campus in terms of offering co-curricular activities. So we have had a speaker on the immigration issue. We have done multicultural issues. There are a large variety of documents, both from the Vatican and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, that fall into the category of social teaching. But in the 1990s, the U.S. bishops tried to pick out some basic themes or core principles of Catholic social teaching. And I usually organize my discussion of Catholic social teaching around those core principles, which are the sanctity of human life and the dignity of the human person, the call to family, community, and participation, the recognition of both rights and responsibilities, a recognition of the dignity of work and the rights of workers, the preferential option for the poor, solidarity, which means a recognition that we are one human family internationally, and then finally care for God's creation, environmental responsibility. And in terms of our work here at Loras with Catholic social teaching, we found that these principles are very attractive even to people who are other than Catholic, so that it can serve as a point of coming together on campus for Catholic and other than Catholic traditions. I think the preferential option for the poor means two things. First of all, that whenever we make decisions, especially public policy decisions, we need to take into account the potential impact on the poor. Secondly, the preferential option for the poor means that we positively need to go out of our way to make sure that the needs of the poor get met. I think that everyone within the church needs to develop literacy in the principles of Catholic social teaching. That it is not tangential to Catholicism, but it is very, very much a part of our Catholic identity. And I think we have a rich tradition that, say, even other Christian denominations do not have when we look at our social teaching.